Not too long ago, I replayed both Undertale because I had never done the passwords route in that game, and Deltarune because my friend Sophie Beth had never really seen Chapter 1. Showing off the game to her and some others was pretty fun, as you can probably tell if you watched this video.
Such simple-minded platitudes.
After that, Sophie and I shared some fan art to each other since she had now become a Deltarune fan, but there was one specific DM on a random Saturday night that forever altered how I perceived Deltarune as a piece of media. At the time of this video, we still have only Chapter 1 in Deltarune, with Chapter 2 still being in development. That game left up a lot in the air about what its story is about and how exactly it's related to Undertale. Fans have been given a lot of time to speculate about what's going to happen, but instead of speculating, a fan decided to continue it themselves. Paper Trail is a fan-made sequel to Deltarune in the form of a comic series. It's part of a blog page on Tumblr and on a Twitter thread by the user Lynx Griffin. They're an artist who's worked on webcomics such as their original work Skybox, as well as a number of Undertale fan comics, such as Dogs of Future Past, which I highly recommend to any Undertale fans. Paper Trail started in November of 2018 and has recently reached its final chapter, creating a grand total of 70. Being honest, I have never really been one to delve deep into fan works of a series until this year. I have absolutely nothing against fanfiction and such. Heck, I have large amounts of respect for those that are able to create writing from the media that they love and make stories that are good in their own rights, but it's just an avenue I've never really explored. I began reading Paper Trail when it was at 68 chapters one night, thinking I'll read a bit and then call it there. And then I stayed up till 2:30 AM, getting halfway through it all. I also stayed up late the following night reading it, and have spent many more nights reading through the story again and again. I have read this story from start to end at least 4 times, and I think I might really enjoy this comic! Which is why I'm going to be spending my time here to talk about Paper Trail and basically ramble about the stuff I like. I have been given the okay by Lynx Griffin themselves to make a video like this in case anyone was wondering, and I'll have links to their social media and the Tumblr master post of Paper Trail in the description. With all that cleared up, let's delve into why you should check out Paper Trail. Assuming you're a Deltarune fan, of course. So as I said before, Paper Trail is a continuation of Chapter 1 of Deltarune. A few days after the events of Chapter 1, Chris and Susie have made it a regular to skip class in order to be in the Dark World and hang out with their friends, specifically Rouse and Lancer. During one of their visits, they're confronted by a mysterious knight that causes them a sudden exit out of the Dark World. It's established here that how the Dark World supposedly works is that it's created from the objects within this room, and that each Dark World resident is based on a specific object, Lancer being a card, and Rouse being a page of Junior Jumble. This time after leaving, however, both Susie and Chris are confronted by their class and Toriel for skipping class. This leads to Toriel cleaning up the classroom that forms the Dark World, removing many of the objects from it and giving them to different places in the town, unknowingly erasing the Dark World so Susie and Chris aren't able to return back to it. Their only idea to restore the Dark World is by recollecting all the objects/characters and returning them back to the room. Each time they reach the location for an object, however, they end up entering portals that take them to other Dark World areas, with Rouse and Lancer returning with them each time. Together in the different Dark Worlds, the Fun Gang look for the different residents of Lancer's kingdom so that they can exit through the dark fountains that take Chris and Susie back to the real world, now with the objects in hand. This is essentially the formula that the comic follows, a back and forth where Chris and Susie locate where objects are and then go through adventures in the Dark World, all the while certain developments and mysteries are happening within the background of each of these journeys. The premise for this story is pretty easy to grasp if you play Deltarune. Structurally, it feels very similar to that of an RPG story, except, in a comic, with the number of pages ranging from as little as 4 to well past a dozen, and it's with that comic format that a lot has been done to tell this story. I'm once again going to be completely honest when I say that my experience with reading comics isn't the highest, so while I'm not able to judge Paper Trail critically, like I'm some comic experts, boy is Paper Trail really fun for me to read. While the real world may be lacking in color, the shading is often very well placed to provide that sense of life and depth to each panel. The environments as well are capable of being very detailed with their line work. In contrast, the Dark World is made up of different shades of grey, with the main cast being filled with a singular color to make them stick out. Not only is this a cool way of theming the worlds and characters, but it also gives that clear distinction between the real world and Dark World. You're never going to mistake a page that takes place in the Dark World to one that takes place in that of the real world. It also incorporates some of the menus into the visuals when in parts such as the battles, which still feel kind of video game-esque, but have some more narrative significance. With that said though, my favorite part about Paper Trail visually is definitely the characters and their expressions. In Deltarune, the expressions are very well done. They're able to get across a lot about the characters with only a select handful of faces, with some I really like. But with Lynx's artwork, the characters take on a whole new feel. The characters in Paper Trail have been designed in a way that maintains their key features, but makes them flexible enough to express all the emotions that they need to convey. Aside from Chris, who we'll get into, you can always tell what emotions a character is going through based on their expression. There is never a point where these characters are given blank faces. They all have some sort of reaction or feeling based around what they say or are told. There is a nice amount of exaggeration to highlight the personalities of each character without going overboard to maintain that groundedness. It's very easy to gauge the personality of a character just from their mannerisms and expressions. Take this character that looks like Rousey but purple. I'll explain why they look like that, I swear. If we were to take away their dialogue and simply look at how they act, we can tell that they're judgmental, snarky, impatient, and easily annoyed, which is exactly the kind of person they are. A lot of traits about this character have immediately been shared with us, and this is just from our first encounter with them. This is also why the comic got a good number of chuckles out of me, as there's just a fun feeling to how the characters can act. The humor may not be as off-the-wall strange as either Undertale or Deltarune, but there's still an undeniable charm to the characters conveyed here. And speaking of those characters, they are without a doubt the most important part of Paper Trail. Compared to Undertale, Deltarune had a specific party of characters working together, instead of just a lone kid. So rather than focusing most on all the weird faces you'd come across, Chapter 1 of Deltarune was more about developing characters like Susie until they became a cooperative team by the end. How Paper Trail chooses to follow up on this is to have the party of Chris, Susie, Rousey, and Lancer be our central cast whose personalities bounce off each other throughout the whole story. While in Chapter 1, Lancer was the funny little dude who was trying to be the bad guy that got on your way, with trying being the key word there. In Paper Trail, he's more like the comic relief to the team, with an energetic attitude that supports the team whatever battle they're in, and still gets along well with Susie. Susie is definitely one of the most interesting characters to examine here. She had the largest development in Chapter 1, as she learned to be more trusting of those around her, and grew a friendship with the other characters. It will certainly be intriguing where she goes in Chapter 2 after that arc, but we can see an interpretation of that here in Paper Trail. While she may still have a layer of aggression to her, she comes across as now being a very loyal friend that's just rough around the edges. Lynx going as far as to develop a deeper meaning to that scary persona she creates for herself, portraying it as a mask over her own feelings of self-hatred and shame. I won't spoil where this leads, but just know that I personally really love what is done with her character in the story, with her dialogue and development being a major highlight. I'll also give a quick shout out to Noelle in this comic. I also won't spoil what they do with her, but she grows to be one of the most important characters in this story, and oh man, it's really freaking good, like I promise you. As for Rousey, they continue to be their very kind and caring self here, always looking for the most peaceful solutions to problems, and is often the voice of reason within the group. I already loved Rousey in Chapter 1, and I continue to love them here. There's this greater sense that they really do want the best for Chris, and are supportive of them every step of the way, which gives the two a pretty nice bond that feels really nice. There's not really too much non-spoilery stuff left to say for Rousey, just know that they're an adorable goat boy that deserves the world. But if you've been wondering about these other dark princes that look like Rousey but are different colors, well, for each new dark world, the gang are accompanied by another dark prince, each also having their own anagram of Azrael, so that means I have the hardest time remembering their names, so I often just remember them by their colors, okay? I'm sorry. They all got unique personalities to distinguish them apart, with the purple one I showed before, Irales, being one of my favorites. They're all pretty fun, but I don't think many of them add too much to the story as individuals, except for two in my opinion. But one of the most fascinating parts about them is the objects that they're manifested from. I already said before that Rousey was a page of Junior Jumble, but he takes this form because of what's on the back of the page, a diary entry from Azrael. This is one of the recurring elements of Paper Trail. For every Dark World, there is a diary entry that follows from different points in Azrael's life. They both explain the personalities of each of the Dark Princes, such as Lyra's fear of Chris, stemming from their entry mentioning how Azrael was afraid of Chris's strange behaviors at night. And it also gives an insight into this version of Azrael, as they're still in college within this story. These Dark Princes suddenly became a lot more interesting to me when thinking about how the diary entries were reflective of their characters, and what this all said about Azrael, a character who's not actually with us. A pretty universal aspect to all the diary pages, though, is the immense distress whenever they're read by Chris. I've held off explicitly talking about them until now, but I think it's time to properly bring up Chris. They were of course a silent protagonist within Chapter 1, who may have had a more twisted side of them, as if in that ending. So how did Paper Trail go about adapting this character in a medium where silent protagonists don't really work out as well? Chris is now a character that talks, but they're very reserved with how much they say. They'll only really say what they need to. There's an intentional reservation and limited expressiveness to their personality, unlike how Lynx previously adapted Frisk in their other comics, where Frisk was an optimistic good kid. I do believe that there is a certain charm to that stiffness Chris has here, but even more than that, you get this feeling that there is more to Chris than what they show, that there is something being held back about them, that you only occasionally get a glimpse of, this darker side that slowly unravels itself as the story goes on. While a Chapter 2 and onwards will likely go in a much very different direction than Paper Trail, Chris is my favorite character within this story. There's something about the quiet and reserved characters who reveal how they're really feeling over time, with it all culminating into a big payoff that I really love. Call it some weird form of self-projection if you want, but like Susie, there's this deeper meaning created to Chris's character that feels unique to Paper Trail, and is one of my favorite aspects about it. Even though many of the other characters may not be as important, they're still given great portrayals. Toriel is the loving but stern mother, Sant is still a chill but mysterious fellow, Burley is a more grounded form of a stuck-up nerd compared to having the smuggest expressions I've ever seen in my life, with others getting similar treatment for how out there their personalities are. There's enough characters shown in the hometown to make it feel like a lived-in place, but it's still small enough to give it that small-town feeling, with hints of a past that is darker than this peaceful place will lead you to believe. If I were to compare the tone of the writing to anything, the closest thing would be of a really well done animated series. There's a good balance between being lighthearted, intense, and overall, really genuine. In total, creating a vibe that I can't help but get invested in whenever I read each chapter. For the last part of this video, I actually want to talk about some big spoilers for Paper Trail, which includes mentioning how it ends. If you're interested in reading Paper Trail at this point, I'd highly recommend skipping this section. If you still don't plan on reading it or already have, then let's go ahead and talk about it. Giving y'all a bit more time, just to skip if you want, just making sure. Alright, here we go. So, for anyone who's read all of Paper Trail, including the recent final chapter, you'll obviously know that it ends on a cliffhanger type ending. The dark world merges with the real world, humans begin to be released from the underground, Chris's soul gets released from the player's grasp, and Azrael returns home with mentionings of a plan on how to resolve everything. This may have left a number of people feeling a bit mixed, with Lynx even stating that there are no plans to continue Paper Trail, and that this was the ending that they wanted, which I honestly have massive respect for. Cliffhanger endings can have a kind of stigma to them for not being the conclusion that people wanted. Heck, they can even come across as a cop-out by some, even when there's a specific intention behind it. If you want my own opinion on this ending, I'll admit, even though I did like seeing Chris get the freedom over their life that they deserved, and while we did get a bunch of big mysteries answered by the end of this final chapter, such as how Chris was created, and what really happened in this alternate world of Undertale, it did initially come across as a bit of a shock to see it all end in that moment. I may be more on the positive side about this ending than some others, but there's still this very unique feeling that I felt with this ending. With all that said though, I don't at all feel like any of my time with Paper Trail was wasted. This definitely became one of those stories where I started to look at it more for the journey rather than the destination. After all, while endings can be a big factor with how much I love a story, they're still ultimately defined by moments you experience with the world and characters, and what that journey means to you. For me, that journey I had with Paper Trail still meant a lot. Characters still had satisfying arcs. We got to see a character like Susie accept who they are, and accept that they're not a bad person due to how they have to live. The relationships between all the characters grew stronger before our own eyes through all the moments we experienced with them. Heck, we even got to see Noelle join the team and kick ass as the fourth party member. No ending could take away from how awesome that was. There are still so many moments that I love from Paper Trail, and I now want to talk about one of my favorite parts of it. Chapter 60. This is where we get to see the big climax for Chris's character. Before this, they had reached a breaking point. On a seed that makes a person confess their sins, Chris releases how they don't feel like themselves. Their soul is controlled by a force that isn't them, causing them to not understand who they are and leading to great amounts of pain whenever they try to get rid of the soul or go against it. This releases all of their built-up pain and frustration, causing them to go insane for a while, even going as far as to hurt themselves and their friends just because it's a choice that they have control over and get a say in. What follows is a conflict between Chris and a giant dark prince that's a fusion of all the dark princes. Chris is in denial that someone like them can be saved, while this form of Azrael believes that even with the soul controlling their life, Chris is still their own person, capable of expressing their care for others and making their own choices, with friends who do legitimately care about the person that they are. This is where the song Don't Forget is finally incorporated into Paper Trail. Here, it's contextualized as a song that Azrael would sing to Chris to help them calm down whenever their soul caused them torment and they didn't know how to handle it, with expressions that truly highlight the strong emotions that Chris is going through, and it's from that recollection that Chris stops fighting. Ever since Azrael left for college, Chris has simply felt utterly alone, feeling now that nobody is there to understand how they feel, and nobody is there to comfort them in the dark. But that's not how things are. They're still surrounded by friends who are willing to help and understand what they're going through. Even if it was hard for Chris to see, they are loved for the person that they are. Call it cringy, call it corny, I don't care. I love this chapter's message of being loved even in your most lonely times. When I was reading Paper Trail, this really did feel like something I needed to hear, and that's one thing I'll always hold close about this comic. The thing about this, though, is that this was a message uniquely delivered by Paper Trail. So much about what this story does great feels loosely connected to what Chapter 1 even is. And I think that is what makes Paper Trail so special to me. Paper Trail took the elements created from Chapter 1 of Deltarune and springboarded off of them to tell its own story, and that's exactly how I view it, not as a mere extension of Deltarune, but as its own story that I will admit, I ended up getting really attached to and loving. It's 100% free for you to experience online, so really, you lose nothing by giving it a shot if you want to see how powerful fan creations can be. Maybe this will all become irrelevant once Chapter 2 releases. Maybe people won't see a big reason to check out this story when the official version is right there, and when this will be simply seen as an AU. Hell, maybe this very video will become obsolete. But I'm glad Paper Trail exists. I'm glad such a cool fan project like this happened. I'm glad this story was able to provide comfort for me at a certain point in my life. And I'm glad that I was able to share that experience with all of you here. Thank you for watching. Well, that seems like a good place to call it for this video. Once again, a major thank you to Lynx Griffin for giving me the permission to make a video like this, and also making Paper Trail in the first place. The links to read Paper Trail and their social media will be in the description like I said before. And if you'd like to support this channel, subscribing, liking, all that junk would mean a lot to me. I have some other videos like this already, except about actual games. But let me know what you thought about this video, and if you want to have more unique topics like this in the future. This was certainly a lot of fun for me to do, so I just hope this video boded well for people. And with that, I'm gonna do other stuff now, I guess. So yeah, take care.